Hi everyone, welcome to this lecture series on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Foundations. My name is Rohit Rahi and I'm part of the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure team. In this particular module, we are going to look at OCI pricing, billing, and cost management capabilities. Specifically, we will look at the various OCI pricing models. We'll bring it to life using a pricing example. We'll look at billing, which is very different than pricing models. We'll look at how you manage costs within OCI. And then finally, we'll look at OCI free tier and always free services. So let's get started. Well, the first thing to note is the various pricing models. And we talked about OCI is an infrastructure as a service offering, and it has a bunch of platform as a service offerings of services as well. And with the cloud, the pricing model you all are familiar with is pay as you go. Pay as you go means you are charged only for the resources you consume. There is no upfront commitment. There is no minimum service period. And usage is, in case of OCI, metered hourly for most of the services. And for some services, like Oracle Functions, which is truly sort of, if you think about it, is a PaaS service, it has a consumption based pricing model. What that means is you only pay for the resources you consume. So in case of a virtual machine, if the VM is running, you are still paying for the VM on an hourly basis. Whether your application is using it or not using it, you are still whether it's active or not active, you're still paying for the whole virtual machine for the hour. In case of something like Oracle Functions, you invoke a function and you only pay for that invocation. So it's a different kind of a model, but the main thing to keep in mind is, like any public cloud out there, OCI has this pay as you go pricing model. And this is a game changer in a business sense. Why cloud took off this quickly? Because it let you trade your capex for opex. You don't have to invest in building out massive data centers and overlay all the capital expenditures. The second model we have, which is a unique model to OCI, is the monthly flex model. Sometimes we also call this as universal credits model. In this one, there is a minimum threshold, which is not much, $1,000, and a minimum of 12 month of commitment. So you commit to that, but in return for that commitment, we give you massive savings, anywhere from 33% to 60%. And of course, the discounts are based on size of the deal and terms of the deal. So it varies between those two boundaries, and usage is consumed from a monthly prepaid commitment. So for big enterprise customers, most of them don't go with pay as you go pricing. Sometimes they do, but mostly it's sort of enterprise agreements. And so this fits very nicely with their current framework. And then the third one, which is not truly a pricing model, quote unquote, but it's still close enough, is this idea of bring your own license. So what you could do is you could apply your current on-premises Oracle licenses to equivalent services on IS and on PaaS running in OCI. The advantage here is in the cloud, you're getting many more capabilities compared to your on-premises, but you could use your licenses. And there's complete license mobility with on-premises. There's an FAQ here. I would highly recommend you go and take a look. It talks about whether you can move your licenses back and forth, whether you need support, and lots of fine print on how this actually works. But in a nutshell, these are the three pricing models: pay as you go, monthly flex, also sometimes called as universal credits, and bring your own license. All right, so what are the factors that impact pricing? Like any public cloud, first is resource size. The bigger resources you use, the more it costs. Because it's a consumption-based pricing, the more you consume, bigger resources you consume, you pay more. Make sense? The second one is the type of the resources. We talked about this earlier, right? You're using virtual machines versus bare metal versus, let's say, something like functions. You are going to pay a different price for that. If you are bringing your own licenses, you're going to reuse your licenses, right? So you're going to pay a different pricing point for that. Data transfer. This is one of the biggest costs in the cloud. and it's super hard to understand. Uh, like other clouds, there is no cost for data coming in to the cloud with OCI, so there is no ingress cost, but you have to be careful with egress cost, and we'll talk about how to calculate that for different scenarios. Um, and then another thing to keep in mind with OCI is all the OCI regions have the same pricing. Now, with other cloud providers, the pricing varies between regions. So it becomes really hard in order to calculate the prices across regions with things like your data moving between your regions and from regions to outside your on premises and all, so it becomes super complex. But in case of OCI, since all regions have the same pricing, it's at least a simpler model and simpler to understand and calculate your costs. All right, so this I just took a screenshot of the compute options we have in OCI. You can see there are some virtual machines. You can see there are some GPU shapes. You can see Intel and these are AMD shapes. There are other ones which don't have an E. Those are Intel shapes, Intel-based processors versus AMD-based processors. There are HPC shapes and there are bare metal shapes, right? So first thing to keep in mind is the metric is the same, OCPU per hour, and you can see that for virtual machine and for bare metal, the OCPU per hour is the same. But in case of a bare metal, you get 52 cores. Here you could get 2 cores, 4 cores, 8 cores, etc. So of course, the metric is the same, but you have to multiply this by 2, 4, 8. Here you have to multiply it by 52, right? So the bigger resources cost more. If you are using virtual machines versus bare metal we just saw, obviously the cost will be different for the whole unit. Even though the per unit price is the same, the whole unit has different numbers of cores, so you will be paying more or less. If you're using Intel versus AMD, so Intel you're paying roughly 6 cents, a little over 6 cents. With AMD, you're paying half of that. So again, a really attractive price point, depending on your use cases and applications which are supported, you'd be paying more or less. GPU, of course, you're paying more because now you have these NVIDIA graphics card within the compute. So you have the Intel processors, but you're also paying for the NVIDIA processors, right? So there's a different price. And then for HPC, again, of course, you're paying a little bit more because you have things like RDMA, etc. on the network side. So that cost is included within your VM compute cost. So again, take a look at the pricing. Depending on your use case, your resources, you would be paying more or less depending on what you're using. Another area which um, obviously is important to understand is the block volume pricing. Uh, for block volume, uh, basically block volume is your storage for your compute instances. So there are two kinds of prices you have to pay for block volume. The first one is you're paying for the storage. So this is calculated on as gigabyte per month, GB per month. And then the second part of the cost is your performance cost. And here basically what you're paying is you're paying for the performance, your input output per second. And you can see there are three tiers. There is a basic tier where you don't pay anything. There is a balanced tier where you pay this cost for some number of uh, performance units. And then there is another one which is called higher performance, where you pay for a little bit higher for getting your performance. So this is basically how the tiers are broken down. And let's look at how you could calculate this cost using a concrete example. So let's say you are using 100 gig of block volume. You have a block volume which is 100 gigabyte in size. Now, the basic case, you're just paying for the storage, right? So you multiply this number by 100, and this is your cost for the month. You're not paying anything for performance, right? So your cost comes out to something like $2.5 for the whole month. In case of the balanced tier, couple of things are important to note. First thing is, because now we are giving you more IOPS, you can see how we got this 6,000 IOPS. Your IOPS per gig for this particular tier is 60. So to get to 6,000, we had 100 gig storage into 60. So we got 6,000 IOPS. So like the basic, you would calculate the storage cost same way, but now you have a performance cost, and you can see the VPUs per gig you get with balanced is 10, and that's basically uh, like a unit we have, but your cost here is this into 100. So this is the cost you have to pay for performance, and the total cost comes out to 2.72. It's a slightly more than the basic, but not that bad. For given the trade-off, you get more IOPS compared to 200 IOPS. You're getting 6,000 IOPS here. And let's look at the highest performance tier. In this case, similar to the balanced, you have 100 gig volume. You get 75 IOPS per gig. So you get 7,500 total IOPS. Storage cost is calculated the same as before, but now with performance, you are going to calculate it with this cost 30 sort of 0.034 cents into dollars into 100, and this is now the cost for performance is $3.4. So the total cost is 5.95. Now this is significantly more than the basic, but you are getting the highest tier, you're getting the highest performance, more IOPS, nearly 30-40 times more IOPS compared to the basic tier. So this is a good way to sort of calculate the how much how much block volumes would cost depending on which tier of the block volume you choose. The another area which is another cost which is sort of hidden at times and not easy to calculate is the data transfer cost. So let's look at some of the details. Now let's say you have a region we talked about in the previous modules. Let's say this is a multi-AD region. You have more than one AD availability domains in this region. Now what happens if you have instances in the same AD if they want to talk to each other? Of course, if that's the case, you should not pay any cost, whether it's ingress, whether it's egress, because you are in the same data center. This makes complete sense. You're staying in the same physical data center. What happens if the traffic goes between two different physical data centers? So this is one physical data center. This is your second physical data center. In case of OCI, your data ingress and egress is still free. We don't charge any money. Now, if you go to a provider like AWS, they have cost between data centers. Now, why we don't have a cost? The idea is many times you would have a load balancer sitting here and taking the traffic and using both ADs for giving you high availability. Now, if this data we charge for that, we are really penalizing you for creating highly available, designing highly available applications. And that's anti-pattern for the cloud because we want you to design applications which are highly available, right? So to incentivize that, we really don't want to charge between ADs, and it becomes super complex to calculate the charges. And that's why I say it's sort of a hidden charge, not easy to calculate at times. Now, this is all good between a region. Still, between two different physical data centers, I get it. But what happens in case a region, let's say, which is a completely different region? Now, the same example as before, you have an instance here running in this region. Let's say this region is one AD only. Can be one AD, can be multiple ADs, doesn't matter. Now, when the traffic goes between regions, we do have a charge. Why? Because the traffic could go through public internet, for example, right? So we treat a region. Regions are completely isolated, right? These are completely isolated from each other. This region doesn't know that this region exists, right? For region one, region 2 is as good as internet, right? It doesn't know that there is a region 2, right? So in this case, ingress data is free, of course, like with internet, and egress, of course, we charge. And you could do it vice versa, right? If you start here, the data which is coming in is free, data which is going out, it has a charge, right? So vice versa, whichever way you consider. Continuing on the same theme, if your data is going to the internet, you pay for data going out. Data coming in, you don't pay, right? So always ingress data is free and egress data is charged. Now there is one exception to this. If you're using something like a DRG, and Fast Connect to go to your on-premises data centers, you actually don't pay for any ingress or egress. And this actually is a big change from a provider again like AWS, which charges for which charges data transfer fees here if you're using a capability like Fast Connect, equivalent Fast Connect. So hopefully this gives you a good overview of the data transfer cost and the various scenarios you could face. Now let's look at a pricing example. Well, simple example, you have a load balancer here. You have two instances running in two different ADs. Remember, we talked about making it highly available, and they're all talking to a database here, which is storing the backups to an object storage, right? So you have two virtual machines. You have total block volume, 2 terabyte. You're using object storage. You're using uh, you're using a database here, a bare metal database. There is some kind of outbound data transfer happening. We are also using a fast connect, as you can see here, and then there is a load balancer, which is right here, right? So this is a very simple, highly available application, writing data to a database, storing backups in object storage, and then maybe this is also going to on-premises to do some kind of a DNS lookup or something for the database, right? So very typical example, common application. How would you calculate the cost for this? Well, looks complex, but let's break it down. So first portion is the block volume. Remember we talked about block volume being performance units, the volume performance units, the VPUs, and the storage. So you have these values here. We are using the higher performance tier here, so that's why you're paying this price. And you could do this cost. This is the annual cost. So we are calculating annual cost both for pay as you go, and we are calculating annual cost for flex, monthly flex, right? Because I want to show you some discounts, what you get as a discount in monthly flex. So you get this block volume pricing, right? Similarly, you can calculate the pricing for object storage. Object storage, actually you pay for the object storage itself, the storage, and then you pay for request. And the request you pay for 10,000 requests per month. There's a minimal charge, really minimal charge, right? So storage are the first two rows. The third one is for the compute. Like we talked about, you're paying 6.38 cents for compute per hour, and you calculate 8 cores for the whole year. This is the cost which comes out. Outbound data transfer till the first 10 terabyte is actually free, so you're not paying any cost here. Of course, if you're paying more, if you're using more, then you're paying more. Database, we are giving you a bare metal machine. So this is the cost for the annual pay as you go cost. But now if you use a flex cost, see the discount you get here, right? So there's substantial discount. I don't have the calculator. I haven't calculated how much is the percentage, but looks like it's roughly, 1/3 of the cost here, or 2/3 of the cost here. So 1/3 of a discount. And then of course there is a cost for fast connect, and then there is a cost for the load balancer. So this is how you calculate the cost. If you do pay as you go, this is the amount you would pay. If you use a monthly flex, this is the amount you would pay. And monthly flex of course is at least 30% discounted from pay as you go, and you commit to that amount, and then you pay, you prepay that amount, and then your consumption on a monthly basis is actually accrued against that prepayment. All right, so let's complete this module by looking very quickly at the last two parts of this module. One is the billing and cost management, right? So in OCI, we have this concept called cost tracking tags. So what you could do is you when you create a tag, you could, or tag definition, you could say that it's a cost tracking tag. And once when you tag your resources, you could tag them with these cost tracking tags. And the idea here is once you do that, well, the first idea is, you should tag all resources, right? And you could make some of these tags as cost tracking. And in practice, you could actually do it for every tag, unless you really don't want to, for some resources, you really don't want to roll up and bubble up the cost. Typically, it's a best practice to do that. Now, why would you do that? We have this capability called cost analysis, where you can look at your spending patterns at a glance, and you could filter your cost, of course, by date, compartments. You could roll up the cost for the whole compartment. You could also roll it up by tags. So right here I could do a filter by my tag, and the cost tracking tag I had just created earlier, I could do a filter and ask questions like how much is a particular cost center being, how much is the spending for a particular cost center. So I could do that and could go very granular within the same compartment. I could have different resources which are tracked in a different cost center. So I could do that kind of analysis. The second thing you could do with cost management is this concept of billing. Billing is nothing but a monthly threshold which you define for your spend, like your bill, your budget for the month, and you could actually set this budget on the cost tracking tags, or you could set it on the compartment. So you could say that my compartment should not exceed, let's say, $100,000 a month, or few of my cost tracking tracks not exceed more than, let's say, $2,000 a month. And as you do that, we do a check every 15 minutes, and we check your actual spend against your budget. So we could actually do that. We could also do a forecast, there are a couple of ways you could check it. You could do a percentage, saying, am I, 90% close to my budget, or you could do absolutely against your absolute amount. And the idea is, when you do that, you actually get an email when you are close to your threshold. So this is a nice mechanism for you to control your cost and see how much you are spending. You could set a budget, and your spend actually will be tracked against that budget. You get an email alert, and this is really something which everyone should do, because otherwise you really don't know if you will have things like cost overrun, and you might get a shock when you see the bill. Might not realize the resources which are running. Well, so the final part here is these usage reports. We also give you detailed usage report about your OCI consumption, and this is a CSV file with one record per resource, along with your metadata and tags. And this is automatically generated, so you don't have to do it. It gets stored, and it contains 24 hours of usage data. And then you can retain it. It's retained for 1 hour a year, and of course you can retain it even for longer periods. And right here you could see some cost. This is my roll-up cost. This is what my compute cost. This is my region cost. This is cost by service, and so on and so forth, right? So it gives you a really nice dashboard. Well, this is somebody who has created this open source tool, so you could leverage it. But in a few months time, you will have a dashboard like this within our OCI console, and you could actually roll up the cost. You could look up the cost by regions, by service, by compute, by storage, etc., etc., right? And you could drill down. You could do granular cost analysis and usage analysis. The final part of this module is around free tier. Now, like any other cloud provider, we have a free tier where you get $300 free credit, which are valid for 30 days. You get access to a wide range of OCI services. You might use $300 exhaust before end of your 30 days, and if that's the case, you would exhaust your account, and you could always change your free tier to a pay-as-you-go account, and you get few compute instances, few storage, you have up to 5 TB of storage. And I would highly recommend go to this link and read all the FAQs on what you can use, how much you can use, etc. Now, along with free tier, we also have always free services. Services you can use for an unlimited time. So these are not bound by 30 days, or these are not bound by $300. These are always free, always available to you, right? So think about this part of the cloud, which is always available to you for free. You get things like two autonomous database. You could run a simple app. You get two compute instances. You get block volume storage, block volume. You get object storage, archive storage, load balancer. You get bunch of these services. And the idea again is to kick the tires. You need access to cloud. You should not be bound by free tier, 30 days, $300 limitations. You should always have some services which are always free, and you could just kick the tires, get a feel of what the cloud services look like. And again, I would highly recommend go to the link and bring up and see all the FAQ there. Well, folks, that's it. This was a quick module on OCI pricing models. We looked at the three pricing models we have. We looked at the pricing example. We looked at billing and cost management, whether it's the ability to do usage reports, whether it's ability to do budgets, have something like cost tracking tags. And then we finally looked at free tier and always free services. Thank you for your time. In the next module, we'll look at OCI support model. Thank you.